Staff do what they were supposed to do today. Instead, they ask, did I do what I was supposed to do today in order to make sure my staff did what they were supposed to do? See, that's a big difference in the way that some people think. Think about this in your organization. If you have an employee that fails, something occurred, but you have failure in your organization, how many of you walk over and put your finger in that person's chest and try to make that person accountable for their failure? Or how many of you, as outstanding leaders, walk away and ask yourself a few questions first? Ask yourself some questions and see if you can take any responsibility for that failure. And if you can, I'm going to ask you to take responsibility for that. So let's go through some questions. Did I provide that person with all the tools that they needed in order to do that job? Maybe I didn't have everything that they needed. Did I provide them with all the time that they needed to make that job occur? See, maybe that was a 4-hour task, but I want to push them. I need more out of my people. I want it done in 3 hours. And maybe I set them up for failure. Or maybe I didn't give them all the training that they needed. You know, that was the day that I was rushing off to my son's soccer practice. And I probably got them 90% of the stuff that they needed. But you know, maybe the 10% that they did not get, maybe that created their failure. So as a great leader of people, if we can take any responsibility, we should. We sit that person down, we let them know, we had failure today in our organization. And you hear me use the word we, by the way. We had failure today. And I think I contributed to that because I gave you all the information that you needed. I think I gave you most of it. But I was in a hurry that day. I rushed out the door, and I think I shorted you on a little bit of the information that may have helped you succeed. Therefore, I want to apologize to you. I want to get it corrected. I want to get back online again. See, some of you are thinking when you apologize to an employee, you're setting yourself up that, oh man, they're going to just find that wound and they're just going to rub it in. But I want you to understand, your ability to apologize to an employee is one of the biggest assets you'll ever have. When you apologize to an employee, look in their eyes and look what's looking back at you. You're going to see somebody looking at you with some newfound respect. They might just start looking at you as an outstanding leader. Now let's just say that you ask yourself those questions, but you can't figure out anything that you could have done differently, so you can't really accept any responsibility. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to go to the employee, and instead of taking your finger and putting it in their chest, I'm going to ask you to do the exact same process. I'm going to ask you to open up dialogue with them and ask them some of the same questions. And you ask them some of the same, which is, did I give you all the equipment that you needed in order to complete the task? Did I give you all the time that you needed to complete the task? Did I give you all the proper training that you needed in order to complete your task? And you know what? By the time you finish that kind of dialogue, maybe the employee will be able to determine there's something in there, or maybe not. But if not, at the end of all of that, they've pretty much accepted full responsibility without you, again, having to take that finger and push it into their chest. I'd also like you to think differently about how we deal with our employees. Do you feel like you always have to manage them? Or do you serve them? See, a leader's role is to support employees and remove barriers to quality. Our job should be to look to our employees all the time and ask them even the question, maybe twice a year. Sit down with your employees and say, are there any barriers in your way? Is anybody or anything standing in your way of ultimate success? If there is, I'd like to help you remove those barriers if possible. I'd also like you to have an environment, a world, where we foster trust and freedom, where we create an environment that eliminates fear. You keep your promises, and you foster freedom to question and contribute. If you're trying to manage through fear, you'll never be an outstanding leader. You keep your promises because you tell your employees, we're going to have employee reviews on June the 1st. If you promise June 1st, do not make it the 2nd. Do not make it the 3rd. You make it the 1st. Never make promises you cannot keep. And when we talk about fostering freedom to question and contribute, are you the kind of outstanding leader that opens up dialogue with your people? Are you the kind that crushes it When they come to you with a great idea, do you sit down with them and listen? Or do you go, don't have time. Don't get back to me. I just don't have time for that kind of stuff. See, they may never come back. I'd also like you to coach and share time with your people. You need to allocate time each day and resources to coach employees to take on more responsibility and authority. I'd like you to keep your employees enlightened and educated. If you've ever heard of the mushroom treatment, that's keeping your employees in the dark and feeding them BS. That is no way to manage people. Positive reinforcement is the only way. And remember, there's only an 18-inch difference between a pat in the back and a kick in the butt, but one of them is the motivator. When employees were asked nationally across the board what they envisioned, what they thought a credible leader was all about, here's what their answers were. They do what they say they'll do. They keep their promises and follow through on their commitments. Their actions are consistent with the wishes and goals and direction of the company. They believe in the inherent self-worth of others and learn how to discover and communicate this to the people they lead. They are capable of making a difference in the lives of others. They admit their mistakes, and they realize that attempting to hide mistakes is much more damaging, and it erodes credibility. They arouse optimistic feelings and enable people to think positively about the potential for success. This is a culture. We don't allow the employees to use the words, I can't. Listen very carefully to your people. When you ask them to do something, if they use the words, I can't do that, stop and coach them through it. Anytime an employee is allowed to use the words, I can't, they've bought themselves out of the process. They've set themselves up for failure. We need to go back to the idea that, oh yeah, is it going to be challenging? Of course. Is it going to be difficult to do? Of course. But can it be done? Absolutely. And the last thing is they create a climate for learning characterized by trust and openness. Now we're going to talk about reactive leadership versus proactive leadership. Now the first thing is if you're going to be a proactive leader, you actually have to have more time in your day in order to do that. In order to be proactive, it takes more thinking time, more planning time. So the first thing I'd like to do is give you a little exercise on how to create more time in your day. So here's just a thought. Make a list of all the things in your day that consume your day, that are wasteful. I'm not talking about things you should be doing, like sales or like payroll or operate, whatever. But I'm talking about things that waste your day that you wish you never had to deal with. Put those things down in paper. Next to each one of those things on the right side, write down about how much time each day on the average that they waste. In other words, thing number one, sometimes I don't deal with it at all. Other days, it takes about 30 minutes a day. So I figure on the average, I waste about 15 minutes each day. Write all those down and take a look at that list and see how many hours per day or how many minutes that you waste. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is only take one per week. That's it. Sure, you can do 2 or 3, but I'm just going to ask you to do 1 per week, and I'm going to ask you to think about what can you do, what systems or what procedures can you put in place that'll remove that wasteful thing from your day so you never have to deal with it again. Example, item number 1. You look at it and you think, well, that's a procedural issue. People are always coming to me, we have problems that exist because it's a procedure that keeps failing. So you finally decided, you know what, if I sit at my desk and I close my door and I just take 3 hours and I work on the procedure and I fine-tune the procedure so these things never come back and haunt me again, that would be a great thing to do. So you do it. Spend 3 hours one week, get that taken care of, boom, that thing never comes back and haunts you again. Going into week number 2, you now have 15 more minutes that you did not have before. Item number 2, you look at it and you realize that's really a training issue. If I just set all my employees down and take 1 hour and coach them and train them on this issue, they should never have to come back and ask me these same questions again. So I'm going to devote 1 hour in week number 2, but it's going to save me 10 to 15 minutes per day thereafter. Once again, this might take, if you have 8 items, it might take 2 months. Be at the end of 2 months, you might actually gain 2 extra hours per day that you never had before. But that is thinking proactively. See, a proactive leader puts systems in place to prevent fires. The result is you're not handling the same fires each day, and you have more time for other tasks. See, reactive leaders spend most of their time putting fires out. The result is they're constantly handling problems with no time to manage important daily tasks. Also, a test of proactive leadership is the ability to recognize a problem before it ever becomes an emergency. So I'd like you to look out 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, a year. Look out what could be the potential for failure. What could possibly go wrong? Do we have union negotiations coming up? Do we have software conversions coming up that could throw us into a tizzy? What are the things that are coming up that could cause emergencies in my life? Do I have a plan A? Do I have a plan B? And do I have a plan C? Absolutely crucial. If you ever heard of the definition of insanity, it is to continue to do what you're doing today, but expect better results tomorrow. And that's what we do to ourselves. We wake up every single day and we say, boy, today's going to be a better day. We go into the office, we look at our list of things to do. At the end of the day, none of it gets done. And then we say to ourselves, oh, tomorrow's going to be a better day. And you wake up tomorrow and guess what? Some of you have been doing this for years. I'm talking 5 or 10 years you've been lying to yourself. Something needs to change. Your life will not change unless you make something happen, and that's what being proactive is all about. Now, when a fire does flare up in your organization, are you the kind of leader that throws a bucket of gas on the fire, where your response escalates the problem? You ever work with anybody like that? You go to them with a problem, all of a sudden, poof, got bigger? Yeah, that's them. Let's just hope it's not you. Or are you the kind of leader that throws a bucket of water on the fire, where you quickly extinguish the problem? Here's a question for you. Is the fire the cause of a problem, or is it the effect of the problem? See, I'll give you a story. I had a young lady that worked for me at one time. Her name was Tabitha, a fabulous lady. Worked for me for 4 years. Dynamic, charismatic, great at her job. She was wonderful. At the end of her 4 years with me, things changed pretty dramatically. Her attitude changed. Her behavior with other employees changed. Her work quality went down. She started coming in late. Finally, she stopped coming in at all. I looked at Tabitha as a problem, and I removed Tabitha from my company. Well, a couple weeks later, sat down with Tabitha and started talking and found out why Tabitha actually left. Turns out Tabitha was not a problem in my organization. I sat down with the other employees for 10 minutes each, and I asked them what was going on in my company. And I found out that they were not my problem. Turns out it was my vice president and general manager was where really the problem was starting from. I sat down with that person and had some dialogue and realized that it was not resolvable, and I had to remove that person from my company. Turns out that that person was the problem. The other things like Tabitha and the other employee things I had going on that I perceived as problems, they weren't problems. They were simply symptoms to a greater problem within my organization. So when you look around and you see problems in your organization, whether they're people or whether they are things, I'd like you to take a deep breath and ask yourself the question, are these really problems or are they symptoms to a greater illness in the organization? Outstanding leaders, they delegate duties, but they never delegate their personal responsibility. See, I'm going to ask you to also stress results and not details. I want you to make it clear to your employees that you're more concerned about the final outcome than the day-to-day details that accompany them. What I'm going to ask you to do is not micromanage people. And for those of you who have ever been micromanaged, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Somebody gives you a task to do, and they stand over you, and they go, no, do it my way. No, do it my way. It can drive you nuts. Tell your people what you want done. Tell your people the time frame you want it done. If it gets done, congratulate them, pat them on the back, and walk away. Don't get all freaky about trying to control their every move. Give people some power. Also, don't offer solutions to problems. We talked about that list a little while ago about some of the things that eat up your life.